Hello everyone, my name is Kiani Altenwalder and today I'll be discussing the glutes. The glutes consist of the gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, and gluteus minimus. The gluteus maximus is a quadrangular shaped muscle. It is also the largest glute muscle out of the three. It originates from the ilium, sacrum, and coccyx, and it inserts into the iliotibial band and the gluteal tuberosity of the femur. The function of the gluteus maximus is hip extension, hip abduction, external rotation, and stabilization of the hip joint. The gluteus medius is a fan-shaped muscle. It originates from the outer surface of the ilium and it inserts into the lateral surface of the greater trochanter of the femur. The functions of the gluteus medius include hip abduction, hip stabilization, and assisting in internal rotation of the hip. The gluteus minimus is a fan-shaped muscle. It originates from in between the anterior and inferior gluteal lines of the ilium and it inserts into the greater trochanter of the femur. The function of the gluteus minimus is hip abduction, hip stabilization, and internal rotation of the hip. An interesting fact about the glutes is that 9 weeks of squat versus hip thrust training elicited similar glute hypertrophy, greater thigh hypertrophy in squats, and strength increases that favored exercise allocation, and similar strength transfers to the deadlift and wall push. Hip thrusts and glute bridges are both glute exercises that strengthen and activate the glutes in the sagittal plane. Specifically, the gluteus maximus is targeted during the top portion of the exercise where the hip is fully extended and glutes are fully contracted. When it comes to the strengthening of the glutes in the frontal plane, lateral cable kicks and lateral band walks both target the glutes since the gluteus medius and gluteus minimus both have the function of abducting the hip. These exercises target the glutes as they require hip abduction as their prime mover. Furthermore, a stretch that targets the gluteus maximus is the pigeon pose since it flexes the hip, which is the antagonist movement of the glutes. Therefore, you will feel a stretch, and the seated figure 4 targets the gluteus medius. To perform a hip thrust on the hip thrust machine, begin by placing your feet on the platform in front of you with a stance that is hip width apart. Place the padded strap across your body and lift the safety bar off. Begin to extend your hips and squeeze your glutes at the top of the movement, then in a slow and controlled manner, slowly descend your hips through flexion. Then repeat the motion until close to failure. The glutes are most activated at the top part of the hip thrust, and this exercise targets the glutes because it uses hip extension as its prime mover, which is a function of the glutes. To perform a glute bridge, begin by lying on your back with the knees in a flexed position and have your feet flat on the ground and hip width apart. Then press through your heels and squeeze your glutes to extend your hips toward the ceiling. Squeeze the glutes at the top of the movement and then begin to lower your hips back down slowly through hip flexion. Make sure to keep the chin tucked and do not overextend the hips when doing the glute bridge. This exercise targets the glutes as the prime mover of this exercise is hip extension, which is a function of the glutes. To make this exercise more challenging, you can add weights to increase the resistance and volume. To perform lateral cable kicks, wrap the ankle strap around your ankles and attach it to the cable hook. Then turn to the side and grab onto the cable machine to use as a stable support to help with balance during the movement. Then brace your core and begin to abduct the working leg in a slow and controlled manner. Then bring the leg back down to starting position through adduction, and make sure to use mind-to-muscle connection when doing this exercise to get the full contraction of the glutes. This exercise specifically targets the glute medius and minimus as the prime movers are hip abduction, which is a function of the two glute muscles. To perform lateral band walks, position the lateral band around the legs just above the knee. Begin by standing with the feet about hip width apart and bend your knees slightly. And lower your body towards the ground slightly as well, using hip flexion. Make sure to keep your chest up and maintain a neutral spine, then take a step with one foot and then take a step with the foot left behind. This should be done in a slow and controlled manner to focus on the contraction of the glutes, specifically the glute medius and the glute minimus. This exercise targets the glutes as it uses hip abduction as its main prime mover, which is a function of the glutes. I also recommend using a resistance band that is not too tight but also not too loose. That way you can get the best contraction of the muscles. To perform a pigeon pose, get into a quadruped stance. Then slide the right ankle forward toward your left hand and place the knee next to the right hand. The front leg should have a knee flexion, and then slide the left leg back and fully extend it. Make sure that the hips are squared as you exhale and start to walk your hands forward while simultaneously bringing your chest towards the mat, and rest either hands or forearms on the floor to stretch the gluteus maximus. This stretch targets the glute as it uses hip flexion to stretch the glutes. Since the main function of the glutes is hip extension, you must perform the antagonist to that, which is hip flexion, in order to stretch the muscle. To perform a seated four-figure stretch, take a seat on a chair or a bench with feet shoulder-width apart. Then lift up the working leg and place the ankle on top of the non-working leg's knee to create a figure four. Then lean slightly forward to stretch the glutes. This stretch emphasizes the glute medius over the other glute muscle since it is located on the outside of the hip, and its function consists of stabilizing the pelvis and abduction. But all three have involvement in the stretch. Ultimately, you should feel a stretch in the right outer hip and glute. Thank you for listening and have a good one.